Hello, my name's Ian. I'm a solution architect with Matillion. Today I'm going to be demonstrating how to use the Twitter query component for Matillion ETL for Snowflake. Let's get started. Matillion's Twitter query orchestration component helps you extract data from your Twitter account and load it into Snowflake. It's an orchestration component, so the first thing you'll need to do is add an orchestration job, which I'm going to name Stage Twitter Data, and switch into it. The component that we'll need is the Twitter query, which is under social networks, so I'll drag that on and connect that up. The way this component works at runtime is that it connects to Twitter using OAuth credentials that you've set up, and you can find these in the Manage OAuth menu. So if you haven't done this yet, then now's the time to set these up. The ones I'm going to use in this demo are Ian's Twitter, and you can see that it's in an authorized state, so it's ready to use. I'll select the component and work through the properties from top downwards, starting with authentication. And I'm going to choose Ian's Twitter from the authenticated list that we were looking at a moment ago. For the data source, the data model includes about 20 of the main elements of the Twitter data model, including tweets, of course, direct messages, followers and lists. The one I'm going to choose today is trends. And this is a good test that your OAuth is working, because at this point you should be able to get hold of a column list or a data selection. And I'm just going to choose all of those columns. You would probably usually want to set a data source filter to just make sure that you're looking only at the data you're interested in. In this case, I'm going to leave it blank for the trends, but I am going to set a limit of 1000 just to make sure that I don't hit any internal rate limits from the API. For the S3 staging area, this is used for performance during the load. I have a variable that I'll use, which I use for all of my S3 staging buckets. And last of all, the table property. This is the name of a Snowflake table, which will get dropped and recreated every time this component runs. And I'm going to call it Stage Twitter Trends. All the properties are configured now, so the things to check for at this stage are, first of all, a green tick in the task validation window, a row of green OKs in all the properties, and the component itself should have a green border. I could run this job through the scheduler or using Matillion's SQS integration, but I'm just going to run this one interactively using a right click there. Now the runtime will vary depending on what you've selected or what filters are in place and how much data it's bringing back, but you should be able to check once it's finished and get a row count at the bottom of the task history there. Now this job is going to become part of my daily schedule, so the next thing I'm going to do is add it into my daily ELT and connect it up as the first part like this. Remember that the Snowflake table which gets created in here is a staging table, and it's going to get dropped and rebuilt tomorrow when this job runs again. So before that happens, we'll need to have some kind of transformations job to do something with that data. And to do that, I'm going to add a transformations job called Twitter Xforms and switch into that now. The input part of this job is going to be the staging table that we have just loaded, and I'm going to search for that, and it was called Stage Twitter Trends. So that'll be the starting point, and I'll choose the columns out of there. I'm just going to choose all of the columns. So once that's validated, we can take a look at the sample. First of all, do a row count, and there's the rows that we've just loaded, confirming that we're looking at the right table. And we can also see a sample of that data as well if I press the data sample. The data that we can see here is fairly typical of data that we can get out of these kind of APIs, in that it needs a bit of treatment before we can fully take use of it inside the database. So in order to do that, I'm going to add a calculator component onto here and add a couple of derived fields. The first calculated column is going to be called date only, and that's going to be taking the first 10 characters out of the ID column and converting that into a date. The second column is going to be the trend ordinal, which is buried inside the ID column and which I'm going to extract using a regular expression, which is a nice Snowflake feature that we can take advantage of here. We can view the outgoing schema from this component by taking a look at the metadata tab, and the new columns that we've added are on the end of there. And it's always worth also doing a quick data sample to just make sure that that's worked as expected. I'll expand out the ID so you can see the full, it's really a concatenated column, this one. It's got two pieces of information in it. And when we get to the columns at the end, we've got the date part only and the ordinal trend number, which is nicely split out into its own numeric field. To finish off this job, the last thing to do would be to append this data into whichever table it's going to end up in, maybe a star schema fact table, and of course add the Twitter Xforms job onto the end of the daily ELT so that it runs every day just after the load is done. Hopefully that video helped you get started with the Twitter query component for Matillion ETL for Snowflake. For more information, you can visit us at matillion.com, or you can launch a 14-day free trial at any time from the AWS Marketplace.